Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry that this stream is late again. For anyone who wants to watch live, I have to say that Streamlabs OBS, for anyone who does any streaming, is incredibly unreliable. It's generally the first 15 minutes. Anyone who's seen more than one of these streams know that we have some issues with audio sometimes, but also sometimes it just doesn't want to stream to YouTube. And it's incredibly frustrating, or a different audio feed won't work. It's not great software, and it is paid software. It's not free, but it is not good. Anyway, that is not important now because we are up and running. Welcome along. If this is your first time, this is Sunday Club, where we do some Ruby on Rails live streaming, and we take a look at building a Rails app together, and we look at how we might approach things and how that might be interesting to someone who is approaching them for the first time, or is a learner in the space, or something like that. So it's just a good way to get some kind of real Rails code up and running. So we're going to jump straight back in from where we left last week. I haven't done a huge amount in the meantime. Just going to give some thought. And we did some planning last week. We basically worked out from the models and the associations we'd already started, how are we going to actually build this app? How are we going to get users into it was where we wanted to start. Like, what does this experience look like? And in the last episode, kind of last week's stream, we looked at like, what do other services that provide this? We're building an app that provides websites for this channel, and for anyone who's running a YouTube or a Twitch channel or anything like that, and they can put their videos on and other content as well. So we built out the sketch, and I think what might be a good idea is if we actually just jump over straight to that. So let's go take a look at our browser. If we bring Chrome up here, and I think we have a link to the Jamboard, this kind of Google Jamboard thing, which actually worked pretty well last week, I think. We worked out how we wanted this to work. So on one page, we had our associations. We just see if this is large enough. I think that's kind of readable. Zoom in a little bit. There we go. So we kind of had our associations that we'd built. We had a user, organization, and channel, and we worked out, or I had kind of done some planning in the meantime to say, okay, well, actually, we think that there's a model in the middle of those two, like a site, because a site might have more than one channel, and they might, want to represent the person or the company or something like that. And then each site wants to have kind of four major functions that it performs. Subscribe, which we talked about maybe being associated with a channel, but maybe you could subscribe to multiple. Sponsor that person or company or whatever, buy merch, and then blog and content. And we looked at a couple of examples of sites that do that already. And then we kind of mocked out what an onboarding flow would look like. So we had a site. We basically, I'm going to try and summarize the last kind of hour of that stream, but it was basically, we don't want to have to ask the user for their username and password right up front because they don't really know what they're onboarding for yet. We can actually provide a different experience of saying, right, let's give, if you give us the site name or the channel name that you want to create the site for, we can then start you on an onboarding flow where we ask for some more information. That might be dynamic. We took a look at an example of a channel that goes and looks at the YouTube API and kind of pulls back channels it thinks that you're looking for, stuff like that. And that would actually build our site out and kind of populate those models. And then on the last step, step 3 here, let me zoom in on this a little just in case it's bigger. Yeah, so we've got step 1, step 2, and step 3. We can see what we think is going to be the user, kind of the user data collection step, which is the email address and password. And we could have, sign in with a third-party service or something like that. And we also looked at a couple of services that already do that. On step 1, instead of collecting any information at all, they just say, hey, give us your YouTube or Twitch or whatever. And I think that's speaking of Streamlabs, this morning they do that. They say basically give us your YouTube, let us log in with your YouTube account, but then you actually can't move your Streamlabs account onto another one. Just from experience, you can't move it onto another channel and things like that. So if we disassociate that and let one user add lots of channels and kind of handle that differently. All right, cool. So that's where we got to, and then we started coding this out. So we jump back to our associations. We built our site model, and it was very similar to our channel model, if I remember. And these little markers here is there's one organization can have many sites. And that was the kind of complexity that we built in around like, I don't know, something like billing or permissions or something like that is often. So we inserted this thing that we don't think we need yet, but we wanted to make that a little bit more complicated. And then it had a lot of very similar properties to the channels itself, like a name and a description and things like that. And then we built out the controller, the create controller for the site, I think it was. And we built a form where you could then build the site, and we did the tests for that as well. So what I really want to do this week is basically just to carry on that and try and get a flow going, because I think the interesting part is probably on step 3, where we have created some channel, created some site, and we've gathered some information about it. And so the user's kind of invested by this point. They've told us the thing that they want to do, and they have popped some information in there, and so they're probably more likely to be like, oh, okay, well, you now want some personal information, fine, let's go. So and then we're going to try and work out how we use Devise, which we already installed on a previous stream, to create the user and then associate the user with the thing we've already made, and how we can do that like securely and make sure that we don't get too much spam and stuff like that. Yeah, because we're not putting any kind of user auth or anything on these first 2 steps. So that kind of leaves us open for people just spamming to create the channels. But they're inert. They wouldn't do anything unless you actually associate a user with them. So let's go take a look at what we ended up with. So here was our sites controller. Let me just check that you guys can see that. Yep. So this is our sites controller, and we also, if you remember, had to build out, I think the last thing we did was build out this organization on step 6, and we looked at the kind of build organization helper, and we had this name here, and we just called it test org just to test that worked. And so we've kind of got that dummy organization. I don't know if the name of the organization was actually mandatory or not, I can't remember. But this works, and then I think we had a feature test for this process as well, or maybe just a controller test for that. Let's close all of these down. So we have just gonna check the audio on the stream hasn't crapped out again. No, that's my voice. Oh, that's very loud. Okay, cool. So we can just close that. Cool. So let's check the test. So we had a feature. No, we just had a feature test for our homepage just to check that worked, and then we presumably had a controller test for the site controller. Good morning. Pedro Mira on the chat. I think is on the Twitch chat. Yeah, so I have like 2 little tabs. One's for YouTube and one's for Twitch, but they come through on the screen. Okay, so that's where we got to last week. Let's go. Let's keep going. No, I'm so sorry if the stream does keep dropping. It's yeah, I've had real problems with Streamlabs today. I've got a stable stream up, so I'm hoping this will be up and running now. But yeah, I had to restart it twice this morning. And also it lost the audio feed. So apologies again for anyone who can't get this working. The YouTube one does seem pretty stable. So if you look up Sunday Club on YouTube, then I don't know if the Twitch one has any issues or anything like that. But I'm going to kind of keep going just because I can see it on YouTube. So if we start worrying too much about Streamlabs, we'll never do any coding because it fails all the time. All right, let's keep this process going, basically. Let's go and take a look. So we basically now have step 1 exists. There's like a very rough form that we can put a name into, and it creates our models. We then have, so when we press the button, there's basically like our imaginary create action here between steps 1 and 2. So that then does the creation. So we now need a place to pass people onto. We need a view to go and do the rest of the onboarding. So I'm going to use a pattern that I've used elsewhere. Now, I don't know how many pros and cons on this particularly. I did a couple of live streams on these on another channel, and a long time ago. And basically, it's this idea of how multi-step kind of wizards in Rails and multi-step processes. And there are so many ways to do them. And I think maybe it's probably worth us kind of dedicating a stream to them in the future. I'm not going to do that one today, but I have also got one. So I'm just going to make a couple of notes for myself as to what to link to in... I should have that one here. As to what to link to in this video description. But I have actually done a couple of streams that look at different options for multi-step wizards in Rails. Just because there are so many ways to do them. So let me just make a note of what to add to the description, because otherwise I might forget. And so we want to add link to streams about multi-step, and also gems as well. I got some feedback on the streams that we had done looking at gems and comparing them and things like that. So there's a gem called Wicked, which specializes in multi-step forms. If we go... So use Wicked to turn your controller into a wizard. Nice. So step-by-step wizard controllers. There's a couple of others if I remember. And there are kind of several ways that you could approach that. I can't remember which one Wicked takes. And there's also a RailsConf talk that I linked to. Again, I'll find that. Link to RailsConf talk about wizards. And when we say wizard, we mean like step-by-step processes. So the user wants to accomplish some sort of task, and we just want to guide them through step 1, fill in a bunch of information, click save, step 2. And that's a pretty common flow you'd go through on most apps. So what I'm going to do is, I'm even going to follow the same naming that we did on the last one. Those got named on a previous project I was working. Those processes got called setups. And the reason they got called setups is very often you are, not very often, but the use case that we were doing was like this. Basically, we were creating something on that first step, and then the rest of the process was basically setting up the information around those models. So here we're creating our site, and then we might ask for information about the channel or whatever it is. And so you're basically manipulating that thing, the resource you created on the first step. So we just called them setups. So I'm going to keep following that wording rather than like wizard or anything like that. And so here we have a site controller, but what we then have is then the site setup, where you can then move through that process. The naming probably falls down as you get into more complex wizards, but you don't have to use it. Like you could call it wizard. You could call it whatever you like in your control, like in your flow, really. As long as because wizard doesn't mean anything. At least setup has like a meaning. Like you'd have to. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Just naming stuff is hard. So we've got sites, we've created it, and the reason that we want this name is because we want to know what to call this controller in Vue. Like, what is this step 2? Because you're never going to come back to this usually. By the time you've done your onboarding or your setup, you're then in the process of doing it, whatever it is, like running your site or running a channel. And there's usually like preferences and accounts and stuff like that. This initial process of creating the thing is usually often very one-off. Again, I'm using the word often very liberally, but your use cases might vary. If you're asked to build an app where, every time the user edits a site, they're always seeing the same thing, and even the onboarding flow just takes them through the edit screen with little helper prompts and things like that. I actually see that quite a lot as well. So Yeah, GDS has a lot of interesting open source examples of multi-step. Yeah, it's a really rich area to dive into. And actually, I think for learners, really interesting because the kind of create, read, update, and destroy flow that you might go through in a bootcamp or something like that, immediately as you go into like a real user experience of an app, you realize that they start to bump into things in different orders because it's not that they're just creating one model. They might be doing what seems like a fairly simple 3 or 4 step process, but under the hood they're touching 4 or 5 of your different models in different orders or in the same form. And so you immediately start to have to disassociate that process in your mind that's so like restful and your controllers all line up really neatly to what the user is doing, and it kind of breaks that flow and you're like, oh, I have to go and change that now. And so the other thing to emphasize again, if you are watching this as a learner later on, is how many different approaches to this there are. Like you will, and there are pros and cons to them all. So if you have a run at it, you will find favorites and things like that. I think the way I tend to do this is fairly simplistic until like needing to do anything more complicated, because in general, I just need to, for this example, we're just working on 1 or 2 models and don't really care too much about the like the fancy paths or anything working, and again you might have security and stuff to take care of as well. But let's go build this out. So let's go build up a setup. And how have I done this in the past? Okay, this is going to be both a memory test and we're going to build them out at the same time. So I think from memory I've done it with a base controller in a namespace. I'm not even going to go and check that. Let's give that a try. Let's actually namespace that controller as part of the setup, because actually I am totally gonna just look at how I've done that in the past and had success with it, because let's give it a try here actually, and here I've got a couple of places just where I know they got used in fairly busy apps and seem to work a bunch. So okay, cool, we've got a bunch of setups here. Yeah, we did have a base controller and then just had some helpers for kind of moving through the steps. Oh, do we want to get that complicated this quickly? Let's build this out, because then I think we can kind of delve into it as an example for learners, like looking at multi-step stuff. And also match up with the other stream I did, because I think that's the same approach I took. What we could maybe do is do a multi-step here in one method, and then this actually sounds awful to try and maintain it, but we could then do another one in the future, because this multi-step process, we could do another one using like Wicked or like the open source stuff from the GDO. Like we could do different ones for different processes. That does sound like a nightmare in terms of like consistency, but at least for learners we could have streams that people could point people to that they could take a look at. All right, let's build this out. Let's write some code, because we've been talking for ages. So we're going to build these sites. Oh, I don't know, how did I even name these? Yeah, it was pluralized. So sites setup, and then I am going to build. Oh, what happened there? Just gonna do this. I'm probably jumping ahead of where we need to go. And then what we're gonna do is let's call this one the let's just call this details controller for now. This is an awful name, but we just want some details of what's gonna happen with this site. And so this is the controller for that second step. So we've got the first step is the site creation, and then we're gonna get the details for that site, and hopefully we can just do it all in one step for now, because then the next step is creating that user. And let's do our controller test as we go, because I was leaving those and this is sites setup. Details controller spec. And cool. And this is yep. And sorry, I'm doing this totally out of order. We want that to come from the base. I'm gonna just talk through what I was doing. I'm kind of doing it all totally out of order. To here and here. There's a top which we should set up a little thing to do automatically, but and this one as well. Okay. I have a memory of controller actions being important for that, but I can't remember why. Let's come back to this. So does this exist? Did I do loads of typos? Let's see. So what do we need for this? It needs it's a site. So yeah, I'm just going to write out our test really quickly just to work out what it is we're trying to check for here. So we've got this site setup, details controller, and the site setup is this namespace that we've made for the controllers in this flow, and we're going to use the site as the resource itself. So that will be in the root to tell us which site we're manipulating. Again, we looked last week at, we discussed briefly the fact that we won't have a slug for it yet, which, you know, do we care about that? Maybe we just use the ID for now, or we could assign some other thing because we don't have a user associated with it, and we don't want to like clog up all of our cool slugs with the first thing the user has typed in. But we think we will have a site because we would have come from the site creation controller, and so we want to, I'm just going to put this in as the show action. I actually don't think it is I'm guessing it's going to be the edit action, but I think I've done this before and potentially made it the index action so that there isn't a suffix on the end. I'm just going to go and check how I have done that in the past. That's great. Details. Yeah, no, I think I've just adjusted the path in the root. Yeah, so I've actually got two examples. I've done this differently in the past. I've obviously changed my mind over time as to how to approach this. So I've done this different ways. Let's, I've got I think I've got somewhere it's index action, somewhere it's edit, somewhere it's show. Okay, so I don't really have a preference for this, but let's make it the edit action for now, because we're gonna say that we're editing the site details, although you could argue then that it would be new because we're adding new details, but let's not worry about that. So it should, let's just say we just want it to return a success response for now, but we do need to have a site. And do we need a real site, or can we just mark that out? I guess we want yeah, at this stage, let's actually build a real build one and actually have the control action respond. Did we build a factory for that? No. Okay. Just going to build the factory. Again, I'm kind of taking us kind of around on a circuitous route rather than doing it step by step. Apologies for that, but we kind of get the gist. So that's interesting. These have ID assigned? I think we generated these via the generator, but I don't think I've ever seen factories with the ID assigned. Or the created at or the updated at. So the whole point of the factory is to flex the actual DB, because otherwise we could just stub that stuff out. Okay, let's see if this works. And then we're gonna, what did I say we're gonna do? The edit view. Okay. And then we just want that to be okay. So we need some sort of route before we run this. Oh, come on, Max. Okay. And yes, I think what we can, so what namespace for control panel there. Let's do the same thing. Sites set up. Let's do something like let's just use the ID for now. Or it doesn't really matter what we pass in there because we can go make a change to that. But let's give it like, yeah, like a nice vanity URL. And then I think at this stage we have to pass in, I might again be going too early there, but I think we have to pass it that as well. And then we can do, I'm just looking, sorry if I'm looking at the other screen a bunch, I'm just looking at a couple of other places. Where I've done this differently in like 2 or 3 different repos. Okay, so I've actually followed this pattern before, so let's do that. In terms of using edit, apparently. So let's give that a try. Maybe we don't need that then. Okay, let's go and see what that does in the browser. Where's our terminal? And we want server up and running, and hopefully that'll let us see some routes that we've got going on. And we have, so hopefully somewhere something to do with setup. Yeah, so about's weird. So it could be like your well, I don't know. We'll kind of figure that out. That doesn't really matter. Just vanity. Like I like a nice path personally. Like maybe we could take the welcome out. I don't know. I like a nice welcome as well. But then browsers hide these all the time anyway now, so it totally doesn't matter. Like No one ever sees them. So that will go to our, if you remember, we spoke about for, if this is your first time building stuff out, remember that this URL that you get, rails/info/roots, is super helpful. You also get it if you get a routing area. You actually get a list of your routes as the output as well, because it tells you what the name of the ID here, like the site ID that's expected. So if there's a mismatch there, you'll often get an error where it's like the route doesn't match up. And so you can look here and see what you're expected to pass through, what you're actually passing through, and then it will also tell you which controller and which action that you're due to end up at. And then, so here we're in sites setup /details/edit, which is site setup /details, and then we're going to have an edit action in here. So site setup, edit, get edit, and we think that will return a response. We don't have a view, so we think that should fail. But let's go check that out. I think that the factory might fail as well, because let's just grab path and see what failure we get. Let's bump this font size up a bit, make it a bit easier to see. What failure do we get? Because this doesn't inherit from yeah, I would agree with that. I'll come back to that in a second. So let me just fix this error. We haven't inherited from application controller on our thing. So let me just try this again. So sorry, I'll fix that really quietly. So basically we have an issue here with our test. Again, your test up, you spot the things that you've missed, and it's like, hey, I actually can't process this at all. And it was because we have set up a base controller, which is empty at the moment, and then inherited from that base controller. So we expect our details controller to know how to handle its request, but the base controller I had forgotten to inherit from application controller. So that's why it didn't know how to behave. And that's something that I just missed while I was doing that initial part. Just to go back to Pedro's comment, he's written, I like to think of routing as a really relevant part of design. It's such a huge part of the internal API you'll have to live with. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that the routing side of things is... I'm a total hypocrite because you just heard me go to repos that I've written before and see things done in 2 or 3 different ways. So I completely agree with how important it is. I also then regularly mess that up with my own inconsistencies. So it's an aspirational consistency and beauty that rarely meets the rarely meets the real world. But we're gonna try and be super consistent now. So we've done this with an edit action. And so let's go and see. We then did get the right error, I think. Oh no, we didn't. Action edit, control the site setup details. Right. Okay. So presumably we didn't actually pass the ID we needed to the edit action. So if you remember in here, this path here tells us that in order to be a valid route, it needs this site ID. That we have that. This error is so. No route matches is quite vague, because it doesn't tell you which one you were trying to hit, why you missed it, what's going on. Whereas in reality, we're trying to hit an edit action, but the edit action that we've got needs this site ID, and we didn't tell the app how to get there, so it can't give us a better error message. So let's go and add that into our request. And see if that changes the failure that we get. It does. Great. Okay, so organization must exist. Perfect. So if you remember, we talked about that very briefly at the start of this stream. We've got this association on site called organization, and we did some work last time to kind of add it as part of that controller. as we create it. So let's add that to our factory. Our factory, again, I'm just brushing over things, assuming that kind of learners are able to go and research stuff, but our factories are basically building that test data in the database for us. And we can just add in my memory of factory bot is, I think we can just type the name of the association and nothing else, which would be pretty good if that's true. Yeah, great. Yeah. So you can see the error message changed, which is, you know, it still doesn't work, but it works different. It fails differently. So here we can say the error that we had, the organization didn't exist. Change that so factory bot lets you define an association. If the model that you're creating a factory for, in this case, which is the site model, has an association called organization, you can just type the word organization here and FactoryBot will handle all of the complexity around, like, oh, I see that's an association, great, I'll go make one, and it knows there's a corresponding factory called organization, and it will therefore go and use that to create the organization when it's being created, which is really really helpful, and it is really powerful. You can do loads of stuff with this. You don't have to just pass it one word. There's a whole API around those associations, but we just needed something to exist at this point. So now the next error that we have is that the edit action can't be found because we haven't made one, which is great. So we can go, and if you remember from, I think we've done this a couple of times in previous weeks, we don't need to have the controller action listed. We can just add a view in, but I tend to actually list the controller action in the controller file as well, just for to be really explicit about it. So in here we want a folder, site setup, and then we have another folder called details. So when you're nesting in the controller level here, we have got this namespace site setup. Then we've got the details controller. In your views layer, you're going to be nesting 2 levels below that, because you've got the namespace for the controller namespace site setup. Then you've got the namespace here for details, and then you've got the actual action, the view templates for the actions. You are in control of that. I'm just this is how I'm going to do this one, and then we just need edit. And I am going to just, I am just going to add that in here as well. Even if it's blank, I think I use that. I use that to kind of know that it exists. It's annoying because they can kind of, basically you just don't need to go and look at the roots like, hey, there's an edit action over here. So let's see if that changes the error that we get. I think I saved everything. Yes, and that is because I screwed the test up, because I did it from memory, which is never good because my memory is not great for the kind of details, but the test I actually wrote was wrong. So it said has HTTP response, and what I actually cared about was has HTTP status. So all that test tells us is that we're able to go and get that controller action and bring back a response. Like that's all we've got so far, but that's probably all we need, because Rails will take care of handling the view for us. But what it means is we can well, let's do it so we know that we've got something here, so we can add something in and say this is step 2, and that'll be super useful for us. And so we know the path for this. It's going to be edit site setup details path. And we can then, at the end of our previous sites controller, that's the test for it, we're going to have it redirect us to, previously when it saved correctly, we had it redirect us to the root path because we didn't have another path for us. And we're going to have it redirect to there. And I think Rails will, from memory, I think Rails will actually infer the site ID. I think it might infer it correctly because there's a thing called site, although maybe it'll only do that with ID. I can't remember. Rails does a bunch of magic key stuff around things like that, like it'll look for models. But I think you might have to do this. And I'm just going to use ID for now. And we can come back and see if that works in a second. So we have our server up and running. Cool, and site is fine. Oh, okay, well, so we can just put in, even though we're not using the, even though we did it manually in the namespace, like site underscore ID. In that case, right, hang on, let's go and check it works at all first. All right, so let's do this one, and then we're going to see what we can take off. So let's do test one, create site. Great. Okay. So we've even got a little flash message, which is good, which is as formatted as everything else. So test one has been created. This is step 2. So if we look at this path that we're getting now, so we've got sites 2. There's our ID. Then we've got welcome because the URL passing. Yeah. Oh, okay. So it should be site ID. Okay. So let's see if we can do it without one at all. So we've then got number 2, which is our ID, and then we've got the parts of the route that we just set manually in the routes, and so this is often like that part of the kind of user experience stuff. Again, Chrome is trying to get rid of the URL bar, so Safari it effectively is hidden a lot of the time anyway. So this gets us to where we want to go. So let's see what we can do. Sorry, there's a conversation in chat with Pedro around like just removing these. Can we just get rid of that altogether? If there's an instance variable called site, let's just see if Rails will. Let's get rid of this. So can we go back? Oh, okay, it doesn't. Let's go back. So let's do test 2, I think. Ah, okay, so that one fails. Okay, cool. So we do need something, and then we just think site will work. And so we can refresh this. Test 3. Oh, okay, have I totally broken that somehow? No, that one works. Okay, so it didn't work with site or site ID, so I should have put in some sort of failure. Something failed. Just like a really useful failure path. You can just pass the site object. Oh, okay, so we can just pass in. So we don't need to pass site as site. Yeah. Okay, of course. So, yeah, I think it's because we're doing that manually. So we go back to the home page. Test 5. Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So yeah, I think it was good. It's cool that Rails does that, even though we're setting them explicitly. So we can just. That was a very long way around. So basically, Rails. But I thought if there was an Claro passing just the site IVAR, yeah. But I thought if there was an IVAR, you didn't need to pass it. Have I just made that up? Maybe I've just totally made that up. Nearly spelled the word 6. Oh wait, we don't get. Why am I not getting my failure either? Okay, well it clearly doesn't work. I don't know where I've got that from. Clearly something in my brain has... okay, fair enough, who cares? Cool, so... you don't need to pass it to view. Yeah. I thought it was something to do with routing. Doesn't matter. Just my brain regularly tugs and stuff like that. I think it's copied to the view, but the URL helper doesn't have to have them. When you're using them in the view. Oh, okay, but in the controller does. Okay, cool, super helpful. Thank you very much. So that takes us to where we want to go. So we are now on step 2. So we go back to here. Zoom in on this again because it zoomed us back out. And so we are now able to create our thing, in this case a site, our model, and then we are able to go through and essentially repeat the same process, create the form. I think what the more interesting part of this is, I think we might just defer doing the form part, because that's essentially just another cycle around doing the same thing. We would add a form for the site, populate some details, maybe do the channel as well, whatever. What we really want to care about, that's a mismatch, yes. So what we really care about is for this, getting to that next stage, which is getting the devise user up and running, because we already know that we've looked at how to do the form and do the update action for that, and then change whatever we need, and then bump to the next stage. I think we will do another stream at another point about using these multi-step ones, because having this base controller and then having a details controller, you would end up with, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many controllers within that. And then there are like a few modules that I've then added onto the base controller. So it's kind of slightly similar, I think, to some of the stuff that Wicked does, where basically you define an array that represents the steps and the order and some of the rules around that. But they're very simplistic compared to what Wicked is doing. And then that gives you some URL helpers. Those modules give you some URL helpers for like next step, previous step, whatever they did. I can't remember what they did, but they did stuff. And I think that's worth looking at. But in this case, it's actually not what we really care about. What we really care about is getting to that user part, the user onboarding, because we know that we can just keep adding controllers where we manipulate the thing that we're doing the onboarding for, or the setup for. So let's go to details, and let's go to the final step. Let's go straight to step 3. So we're not going to add an update step for the details controller in this stream, because we assume that it's basically going to be the same thing as it is for the sites controller. There'd be, just mock it out, there would be some sort of update action here, and it would do something like update the site, and then it would say if update successful, redirect user to next step. If not successful, render v. So pretty normal stuff. So that's what update would look like if we were going to write it. So basically all we really care about is this redirect user to the next step. So what we're going to do is just put a link on that view. So edit is going to be, this is step 2, and we're going to drop in some other text here. This is where the form will go to update the site model. And that's all very exciting, but what we really care about is we're going to add in a link. And this link is going to go to skip to step 3. I'm going to say something now that I say every week and never find the time for during the week. I'm going to try and come back and tidy some of this up, because I know we've still got some whip commits, and I'm going to try and make some time to tidy things up. Every week I've said that. It will happen. So we don't have a route to pass in here yet, because we haven't made it. But what we do know is that we are going to want the form where we then populate the user details, and that's email address and password, and then a button where they click on it, and then that takes off to create the user. Now, this is where we bump out of anything that I think I've, let me see how, I've kind of done something like this before, but my memory of it is not great. So this time we might be flying a little blind, but that's kind of interesting. That'd be good for people to see. If you're a learner, then I think we may spend a little time fumbling around, but that's not the worst thing in the world. Right, I'm literally, sorry, I'm just on the other screen looking to see if there's a place where I did something similar. I'm actually looking in the roots file of a couple of repos just to see. No, I totally had a user at that point. Okay. And okay, that's absolutely fine. So we're just here. We're just going to pop a link, and we're going to go over back to our step 2. Right, so this is step 2. This is where the form will go to update the site model. Everything's got an exclamation mark because it's so exciting. And then we've got this link here, which is going to go to step 3, which isn't doing anything at the moment. And the first question I want to ask myself around step 3, which we're creating, is what's generating this view? Because we had some views generated by Devise, and they had a bunch of stuff for us. If you remember, because I can't remember any of them, they give you users sign in. Here we go. Great. And they also give us users sign up. Cool. So they are being Devise, the gem. So that's where all of this has come from. If you remember, you can go back and look at those streams in the channel. We didn't have to build out any forms or view logic for these. These just appeared. And so what we want to do is basically have this form, but we don't really want to pull the user out and into Devise. We want to kind of keep them in our flow in case we want to do stuff with them as part of that flow. So, like for example, maybe we want to add some fields to this user form that Devise doesn't have. That could be like first name and last name or something like that. So what does Devise give us to play with? And now I'm not checking the stuff that I've done elsewhere or before. I'm genuinely looking around. So we might slow down a little bit now, but that's fine. So registrations, edit. Okay, so it gives us it gives us a form with I'm loving this. Unhappy ? Cancel my account. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Unhappy ? I like that. So that's editing your registration. So is that like account editing? I guess it is. And then session is sign in, and there is, okay, and then you just destroy the session. Okay, so this must be the new user. And we get this registration path, which is the controller action for that. That's the Devise controller action for the user being created. So resource in this case for the app that we made, we called the resource user. So we have email, password, password confirmation, and sign up, and then they have a shared link here. So presumably we just don't need Devise shared error message. What's that doing then? Errors, messages not saved, account. Okay, so that's just showing any errors on the model. Okay. I keep going to edit. So we could just have either this or make a new partial, because all we really care about is posting to here and handling the failure correctly. Oh, where does that redirect back to then? If we say, right, it redirects back to here, presumably. But you can override these, is my memory of having done that. Ugh, okay, we are relying a little bit on my memory, so I have definitely overridden some of these. What was the case for that? And it must have been something like registrations controller. Sorry, I'm just looking to see what I've done here, because if I've done this word before, I don't really want to get too bogged down in it. I may just be able to grab something. So what I'm interested in, what I'm looking for is what do we if we want to be able to have this user, like this form replicated somewhere else, like do we just make a partial, then we can just do our own thing and just post to that controller. Registrations controller, here we go. Oh, I've got a real, okay, we overrode the crap out of it here. Oh, that's doing a bunch of redirect stuff, okay. We don't really care too much about that at this stage. Oh, I see, and there's like after sign up path 4, and you can, oh, there's like helper methods on the controller to decide where you want to go. After inactive sign up path 4, okay, so if you've got inactive, okay, cool. Sorry, I know I'm reading this off screen, it's just because it's in another repo. Okay, cool, so did we actually, I'm going to carry on doing something. So did we use that view, or did we just make, did we just make a whole other, controller and view and everything? No, I'm not sure there what the downside of that is. So if I, okay, so let's just write some code. Let's see what happens here. So let's make a new controller here. So let's say yeah, let's call it the user's controller. We can change the path or whatever we want. But I mean, that is the resource that we care about. I mean, realistically, this would be the new action. Because we want a new user. Because we could probably chop those paths up. Okay, so let's then just get the test. Let's just see. And here. Okay, so then let's just give ourselves a root. I'm just skipping the testing for a moment just to work. I'm trying to work out what the hell I'm doing here. That should give us a root at least. We can use on our link now. Here. Oh yeah, they don't get formatted, do they? Okay. Oh yeah, so that so this is what if you were following the chat earlier, Pedro and I were discussing. You need to add in the instance variable in the controller, but I haven't needed to add it in here in the view. New site setup user path. Even though you do need a site, there is already one here, so the view helper doesn't need it. You could do that as well, and I think it would do. Oh no, did we make this? I don't think we actually retrieved the site. No, we didn't. So yes, you would need to make the instance variable. But this works anyway. So add your user details here. Cool. So here, can I just make a new form that posts to here to make the user? This is doing anything special, I think, is what I'm trying to work out. So form for resource. Because we could have, or can I just put this in as a partial? And like pass the, is there already one shared? Thanks. I suppose this comes down to like how different is this from any of the other, like is there any other way to register other than through this? Because presumably not. So then this would go away. We would never use this if this was the only way to create the account. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Whereas if you have an error in the, just gonna go back and take a look at, again, it's something else I've done before. I'm basically just trying to think about what we're letting devise do and what we're not letting devise do. So controllers. Oh, we actually just didn't do the create through devise at all. We just made the resource. Okay. Cool. Because what is that actually doing? Okay, so sorry, I'm kind of being really vague. I'm just trying to see if we actually need to use device for this at all. Like, could we just say you create the user in the controller action and move on? Like, do we care? What do we, like, presumably as long as we tell it the password field is a password, it handles that. What is device actually doing in those controllers here? Build resource, resource.save. Yield resource if block given, resource.persisted. After sign up path 4. Yeah, so presumably we can just require no authentication, authenticate scope. Presumably these are things that you can add to, you know what? The sessions of resource. So the minimum password. Yeah, I suppose if you use this action and then it goes for, so if it fails, if resource dot persisted, create a password, respond with resource. So what does respond with do in terms of just return you to the one you came back from, so we could render the same view? if we reuse this, can we just do this? I actually have no idea. We don't need that because this now knows what it is. Resource name, I assume, is user? Does that just take a string? I'm not sure what that's actually. What's resource name doing? As resource name. I think that's presumably something in device. Yeah, I think it's just returning a string. Yeah, I think it's just bringing the name of that model back. The device mapping, I think, is just going to say its name. Okay. Just, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff here that has come from the. Let's just pull this out real quick, because there's a bunch of stuff here that's come from that controller. Okay, does that even render? Oh, okay, so it's actually looking for an instance at that point, whereas we haven't got one. Okay, let's just get rid of that for a second. We can come back and make that later. Okay, so then if we say gibberish and then enter a password. Okay. So that user has been created. So we can then just pass that user off somewhere else. So as long as we can handle errors, there doesn't seem to be an issue with just using our own form, but using the device controller action. And I'm assuming there's a benefit to that rather than just using the controller action for this controller, like just calling user.save. I'm assuming whatever is happening in here, I'm not 100% sure what is going on. Let's go back a few steps. Here, so like clean up passwords. Is that on this controller? No, that sounds important though. That sounds like something we should be cleaning up. Like cleaning things up sounds good when it comes to user accounts, especially when it's got the word password in it. Set minimum password length. Oh, so that is presumably just setting that instance variable. I'm not sure if that will work with build resource in the controller. It doesn't seem to expect an object. But it should still just take the params that we pass through though. So it does seem to have made it. Presumably we do have that user in the DB. Hopefully .last will be chronological. Yep. So we have made our user. So it does seem to have worked. I'm not sure if that will work with build resource in the controller. Is there anything else that we like? Not quite sure what you mean. In case this is a really bad idea. But then the other, like, Oh, do you mean build? Do you mean that like it wouldn't work with build resource if we have to do it ourselves? Like if we did it in our own controller? Like, because our other option would be to go in here. And we could do something like somewhere. Some sort of flash or something like that. And then in user params, we could just put through params and scoping happens to line up. Says yeah, because we're just using user. But I think you can tell devise what you're willing to whitelist somewhere as well. So if we wanted to add stuff to that form, we could tell devise that we wanted it to allow it. Those things. Strong params. The parameters sound a bit if you customize. When you customize your own views, you may end up adding new attributes to forms. Okay, here we go. Wait, maybe we should have read the docs first. Okay, as usual, that's something I haven't done. Rails form moved the param sanitizer from the model to the controller, causing device to handle this concern at the controller as well. There are 3 actions that allow any set of param, blah, blah, blah. Sign in, sign up, and account update. Oh, okay, so we have to take account update into things. Permits authentication, please, plus password and in case you want to permit additional parameters the lazy way, that's got my name all over it, you can do so using a simple before action in your application controller. Okay, so we can check them in there. The above works for any additional fields where the parameters are simple scalar types. If you have nested attributes, say you're using accepts attribute field, which I don't really want to do in a sign up form, I don't think, then you will need to tell devise about those nestings and types. Yeah, Pedro's saying he gave up on devise. I can see what we're gonna persist, but I can see we did. If you're looking at this and thinking, holy crap, why are you having to think about this stuff at this step in a user flow? A couple of streams ago, we did look at other user authentication gems. So devise is not your only option. So go take a look. Because of questions like this, like genuinely, like do we really want to be diddling around with stuff like this? Like why are we not sure? Like frankly, it's my memory, but why are we not sure whether we do it in our own controller action? Can we just pass it to the devise one? I just don't know if there's any. If we just did this. Oh yeah. So okay. So what would the params be? I think I've done this. Hang on a second. Like. If I recapture model, so what is params? I think it just took in password. It was just like we didn't have to do any security stuff around that. Let's go take a look at what devise actually takes as those. So does it do it specifically on the registration controller? Does it define them there? Just looking for where it generates those strong params that it's willing to take. Here we go. Sign up. What's this? Yes, I'm trying to allow params authentication, defines allow params authentication. I'm reading this looking for does it have to generate those on the fly because the resource could be named anything? Like if it's yeah, are these built dynamically? Like the params it's willing to take are presumably built. That's the actual sanitizer. Which is class resource name and params. So where is it getting params from? Is it actually using a method for that? Okay, so this is what Pedro was kind of referring to in terms of having to consider fighting devise in certain scenarios. Here we go. So it's when you initialize the sanitizer. Yeah, we knew that because that's where we were already doing that. Password params. What I'm looking to see is if they're doing something fancy that we're potentially likely to screw up if we do it in our own controller action. Because that's like reset password stuff. I'm not talking about doing that, but if we just pass the password through, I think it's just a. Should we pass through? The downside is potentially that we don't get any of devices like helpers, like the before and after actions. If we were to do it in our own controller action, do we care about any of that? What do they do? Oh, they send out like the confirm your account emails. No, I think that would happen anyway. I think that's a model. I think that's a model callback. Sessions controller, that's signing in. That's a whole other thing. This is just account recovery. Okay, let's give this a try. Let's oh, I only pseudocoded this. Will this work? So let's put the params on this line here. Let's just put message something. Your user account has been created. Cool. And then we're just going to take them to the home page. Cool. So we need our params then. But the only ones we need, I think, are the user, which I think is why they're dynamic on the other end, because I think they are email, password, I think that's it. User save. Okay, so then if we change the form, we can get rid of a bunch of these windows. We don't need any of this for now. That's the devise one, which we maybe not be using. And then this is our new one that we've copied over. So instead of this, this could be, let's go into our roots and give ourselves a create action here. And then we're going to go over to our browser. We are going to see where that ended up. Site setup users path. And that's where we are going to ask this to go. So form for user.new, so user path. And again, I think maybe that will work. I don't know how to sign out because I haven't put the sign out button, so I'm just gonna kill that. Oh, hang on a second. I had like a cookie extension thing. Where's that gone? There we go. I just need to kill all these cookies so I can log out. Go to step 3. Does step 3 work? No, it doesn't. Great. I think do we then need to pass the site in, but we didn't actually. I'm just doing this really quickly. I would normally do this in an action. I'm just trying to get this working. So let's see. Oh, did I totally screw up the Yes, I did. I totally screwed that up. Do I then not need this? I might not need that. I might therefore not need that. Sorry about that. That's a little bit of a detour. Okay, cool. Okay, so now we have email, password, and password confirmation. So do we need a param for that? I have not built a form with a password confirmation. Can we, how do we turn that off? Because that seems really annoying. Because it's so easy to devise, disable password confirmation. Again, I'm going to return to Pedro's point earlier that you oh, you just straight up don't add it. Okay, well that would solve that. That can go because they can just reset the password as long as they put the email address in correctly. And again, if you can add sign up with Facebook or Google or whatever your third-party preference is. Does that not save? What's happened there? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong view. This one here, cool. So our email address is testaction@example.com, and then password in. Cool. Am I signed in? Did that make a user? We didn't get our cool flash. Did I forget to render the flashes on the home page? Because I've added it as a params. Okay. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for helping, Pedro. Have a great day. So it's because I've added that as a params and not a flash. So that's stupid. But I think we maybe made a user. So user.last. Great. So we've now got a test action user. So that totally worked. And I don't think we need to use that devise action. So let's go check that we can then sign in as that user. So again, let's destroy all the cookies. Go to our home page. So we're now signed out, although we should add something in the UI to tell us that. Go to users.signin, and then it was test action at example.com, and then dummy password, and then log in. You have to confirm your email address. Ah, damn it. Well, we did this before. There's like a device config that I've already forgotten what it is. It's something like allow something access for. Expire. It's like unconfirmed, doesn't it? Allow unconfirmed access for. Let's just let's do that one. Oh, do you have to restart the server for that? Maybe. Yep. Sorry, let's just restart this server real quick to have that config change kick in from devise. Let's just copy and paste the email address so we don't have to keep doing that. And there we go, sign in successfully. Great. And so we've created a user without using the devise control actions. Okay, let's just do a little bit of due diligence. Not using devise controller actions. Let's just see if anyone cares. Like, is it important that we use them? Sending confirmation. Yep, so that's someone saying, what about confirmation instructions? Which action is used? It's a model callback on the confirmable module of the user. reset password. So we can then go and look at, so in devise, we can just go and look at that controller and just see if there's anything that is the registrations controller in those. Require no authentication. Authenticate scope. And set minimum password length. So we can do our own UI around that. And then, so we can still use update for like updating the user's account and things like that, because that will let them change all their unconfirmed emails and stuff like that. Cool, okay. Right, so this gets us to the point where we wanted to get to the end of this session, which is, let's go back to our document here, our plan. So step 3, we wanted to have the user enter their username and password and click the button, and that would create the user account. Most importantly, what it does is associate their user account with the thing that they have been creating, the site that they have been creating. So if you remember, basically we've got like the view here represented by the screen, and then in between each one is this like controller action, the kind of the bit that the server is doing. And so when you click this button here, you're then going off to the server and you're kind of moving onto the next step, and there is this controller action. This is the create action within our user's controller. We've decided not to use the devise one because I don't think we have to. So that puts us in more control at this specific point of the flow, and we can do what we like with it. And we can know at this point here whether we have our user or not. So all we've asked for is the email address and password. If it's saved successfully, we expect devise to have put errors on there correctly and handle all of that stuff. So render new should work. Although we're asking for so little, it's just username and password. So if it's failed, it's probably the password wasn't long enough or something like that. With the render to new, everything should match up and it should fail. In fact, let's just test that out real quick. So sign in successfully, let's sign out again just by deleting those controllers. So just put in some dummy information, go to step 3. Put in a dummy email address, and let's just put in a 2-character thing here. Okay, so it fails, but remember, if you remember, we took out the little bit of code that renders the model errors. So we could just add that back in and fix that. So we just need this to work in terms of spitting out those errors, which is fine. In fact, does this work if we just do this? Yep, cool. So basically we're trying to spit out the errors when there wasn't a user, and the user only gets created when they submit it for the first time. So here we say 1 error prohibited this user from being saved. Not a great bit of copy. Password is too short, minimum of 6 characters, and it's wiped the 2 fields. Cool. This one will always get wiped because it's a password field. I think. So that is great. Now, because we're in this controller action, go back into our user controller. At this point, the user account has been created, and we also have our site. So we know the ID, and what we can do is say, oh no, and we can set that here. Site dot find, yeah, because we need that to exist so we can actually have it error out if that ID isn't there. And so now we have a site instance variables set, and so then we can create a before action, which is set site, and we can have that fire on each one because it'll happen if the view. Set site, and in here that means we now have our site, and we can say, oh, did we associate the site with anything? Yeah, belongs to an organization. Great. Okay, so we can then say site dot organization equals well, we can just update it. with the users organization, and we can do it through and sort out all that stuff later, but let's just check this works for now. So what we're doing here is saying, right, associate this user via the organization that they're a member of with this site, and we can change the associations later to make them make more sense, but we want to attach at this point this user to this site somehow. This is not how we end up going to do it, but it'll work for now just to show us that it's working. So let's again sign out, go through that process again. So we're going to make a new site. It's called test org site. So we've got test org site has been created. Okay, and then we're going to create a user called test org user. Copy that because it's bound to go wrong. And we're going to do the sign up. Oh, it did go wrong. So the user doesn't have an organization. What does the user have? We didn't add any association to that. So a user can have many sites through organization. Oh, that's so annoying that we didn't set this up at the time. I didn't do anything to user at all. Okay, okay, so that's fine. We just have to add this association. I'm going to skip the tests as well, so we can say did we say that the organization has many users? We did not. Okay, we did none. No, we did none of the association work. Okay, I don't really know if that matters too much because we've kind of shown where we can do this. So we now know that once we've done this creation for the device part, we're in the controller action here. We can say we are attaching this user to. I mean, we could just. Okay. Yeah, we're just already over 90 minutes in because we started late as well. So I'm gonna consider that a win. I'm gonna so we can tidy up that next week. So it'll only take like another, I think it'll take like 10-15 minutes or so. But basically, I think we're kind of there. This is at the end of this flow. This flow here. So we have our user. We have the thing that we are associating with, both the organization and the site. We haven't added those associations in technically, but we now know that we can just make them here because we have everything. Once that goes through, then we can take the user wherever we want, basically. So we can move them on to the edit screen for the site, perhaps. Maybe we take them onto another type of onboarding flow, whatever we want. Like, we've got the stuff out of them, like a user education flow as to how to do things. But what's most important is that we've got to the end of this flow and got everything we need. We've got the thing that they're creating, the site. We've got added another controller action, another controller where they can change the details of those. We looked at kind of mocking up the update version of those, the action for those. So we would populate it with data, and then at the next step, we would then add the user in, and they would then be associated with the thing they had just made. Now, one of the things that we haven't really touched on is the fact that between step 1 and 2, that thing is yet unclaimed. So someone sneakily could kind of go through and jump onto this URL. So if they were just incremental, for example, you could go through and just claim them all, because you could go, let's say that someone finished steps 1, so they type in, site A, and they click the button and site A gets created, and you never did anything with it. Someone could come along later but that created ID number 55, for example. So, we've got /site/55/welcome. Someone could come along later and jump in on that and say, okay, great, well, I'm going to complete this, and then I'm going to create a user at the end and claim all that information for myself. And so realistically, we need to make sure that case is covered. So A, we might not care. Like, if you're just adding an arbitrary bit of text in here, maybe depends on what you're collecting on step 2. That's not great, but like you might not care, but it also leaves it open to someone just like spamming all of the numbers, or maybe they're incremental or something like that. So in reality, we've used the ID for that, which is probably not what we want to do. We probably want to obfuscate that away. Maybe we use like a randomly generated slug temporarily, like I don't know, when you make a Squarespace site, which is like a content management system, they give you your first site like a really random little slug. It's like just randomly generated words. I think GitHub does the same thing for repos, I think. So we could just randomly generate something that would be kind of cool but nice and unique, and then no one can just jump through and claim them all. You'd only know yours, and then you could come back to them. So that's the technique that we can implement next week, just to protect those flows. And the next thing we want to do is also look at some of the UI around this, rather than having to kind of skirt around the edges of it. So I'm going to wrap things up there. Let me just jump back over to here. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's watched or fed back, or to Pedro for commenting on the stream, and everyone else who kind of interacts or leaves posts on Reddit and Twitter and things like that. Like, it's super helpful and useful. I hope the feedback so far is that people are finding these useful. Yeah, just going to carry on, and we're going to progress, and I will try and do all of the tidy up that I say I'm going to do every week and then never do. So have a great week, have a wonderful Sunday, and I will see you all next week. Thanks a lot.